Chris, you ready to get into some Arkansas Razorback football? I mean, what are your thoughts this year going into Arkansas?
I'm not going to be I'm not going to sit here and act like I know a boatload about Arkansas football. But what I do know is that they can run the fuck out of the football, judging by last year's team. I do know that KJ Jefferson, their quarterback, is a stud. Like, he is a really good quarterback, especially in the SEC, where I think the talent level is pretty much far superior than any other conference. It pains me to say that because I'm a Big Ten fan, but no, I'm a realist. I'm not dumb. Thing with Arkansas last year, 7-6 season last year, not a bad year, especially when you getting your shit beat in the SEC. It's not easy over there with the LSUs of the world, Christian. God, forbid I have to say Georgia. I know that makes you happy. Alabama. We're talking about a lot of good teams down there. I don't think I have to educate anybody on the SEC and how good it is. But they did average 32.5 points per game last year. That finished 35th in the country. That's very good, especially playing in the SEC, where I think a lot of good defenses played as well for the most part. Here's the problem, and you know where I was going with this, the defense. Giving up almost 31 points a game. That was 101st in the country out of 132 teams last year. Jesus. Hard to win a lot of games when you're giving up 30 a game. They did have the ninth. Let's go ahead, Christian.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's funny that you bring that up. I know you're getting ready to jump into another stat, so sorry to cut you off here, Chris.
No,
but to me, this is what I think about Arkansas last year. It's really weird because I looked at the same stats, right? And I'll get to some of the stats here that I've got. I know you've got your own stats, but their defense last year at certain points played really, really well. Certain games, like, it was the weirdest thing ever. They would just shut teams down, but then they would struggle to score 30 points on offense. So it was like you're a Nebraska fan. Oh, yeah, it's like they would just flip-flop. They couldn't put a complete team together. They'd either give up like 45, and score 50, or they would give up 20.
Be a 14-10 game.
12. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. I'm glad you interjected there, because that's actually exactly where I was just going to go with that. That was my next statement, is they did have the 19th toughest strength of schedule last year, obviously, and that doesn't surprise me playing in the SEC. So they played a lot of good teams last year. There's no doubt about it. But I was just going to say that after that was my point, was like, they had some weird games. And you brought up Nebraska, and obviously I know how to talk about Nebraska watching them. They had some games where Georgia Southern, they score 40 but give up 42, Then they play Iowa, and it's like a 17-14 game. It was weird. Defense showed up every once in 4 games, and I think that's kind of how Arkansas was last year too. I mean, yeah. I will say their offense is way better than their defense overall last year, but we're not talking about last year. I'm just bringing up last year's stats. Like I said, I touched on KJ Jefferson. I think the kid's a stud. He did complete 68% of his passes last year, which I think is pretty impressive at the college level, Christian. He threw for almost 2,700 yards. He had 24 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. He's got some good legs, man. Rushed for damn near 650 yards, 9 or 10 TDs on the ground, man. That's a hell of a year for a quarterback. It is, especially in the SEC. Raheem Sanders, he's no slouch either back there at running back, almost 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns last year. They had the 6th or 7th, I think, off the top of my head here, best rushing attack last year. I love that about Arkansas. If anybody knows me about this channel, I love teams that can run the football. So I do love they play a smash mouth style of ball. They did that since Brett Bielema. He's no longer there, but they've kind of adopted that whole big offensive lineman. We're going to pound the ball down your throat. The only problem is they don't really have the defense side of the ball. That kind of takes them out of some games there. But, I mean, the other question I have with Arkansas, I'm going to kick it back to you here real quickly after this, Christian, is who do they have at wide receiver? I mean, they lost some guys last year. I know they got 3 dudes. They got that I can't even say this kid's name. It's Isaiah Stagma or something like that.
Yeah, he had I think 100-something yards last year.
Yeah, he's a 4-star recruit though.
He's good. I mean, he's going to be one of their slot receivers there. To me, it starts and it probably is going to end up flowing through Andrew Armstrong. He was at Texas A&M Commerce. But, I mean, he put up 1,000 yards and 13 touchdowns last year, so that's not bad. But, again, he's got to prove it at this level in college football. He's going to be joined by a fellow transfer from Bowling Green, Tyrone Broden. I mean, he had, 500 yards last year, 7 touchdowns, at a much smaller level. I've got that as the biggest question mark too, Chris, trying to figure out pretty much who are they going to lean to. They got another good, tight end as well. I think in the transfer portal, a lot of transfer weapons in the receiving room there. So it's just going to be how quickly can they start getting on that same page. I think going to be the biggest thing there. But here's the other thing, and I think this is the interesting part of it. Hogs are going to look to transition away from offensive coordinator Kendall Briles, right?
Okay.
And go to more of a – they're bringing Dan Enos, who has a traditional style of offense. He's more of a pro kind of guy, if you will. They got, like you said, you touched on Raheem Sanders. They also have Rashad Dubinson, who he put up a respectable 6 touchdowns last year as well. So
they're going to run the football.
They are going to run the football. The one thing I can say, believe this or not, Chris, last year going into the season, right, it was a weird year because I actually had picked Arkansas to be a dark horse team to compete for an SEC championship.
Oh, wow.
Going into the season, right? Because
Okay.
they were coming off a 9-win season. You get KJ Jefferson back. KJ Jefferson, believe it or not, that year, 2 years ago, led the team in both passing and rushing.
Jesus.
And to me, it's just so crazy because now, like you said, even last year, he still did good. He finished second in rushing last year. So offensively, they got some question marks. I think they're going to be better. They're probably going to look to run the ball a lot more, which, again, it's the SEC. You can run the ball down people's throats, but at some point, you got to have somebody step up, and you got to have 2 or 3 guys be the go-to guys for you that can put up, receptions and touchdowns, man. That's right. The big thing at this level, and so it'll be interesting. What about the defense? You touched on the defense there, Chris. I got it as a weakness. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I do. I don't know if the defense could get much worse statistic-wise. Like, right? I just they gave up a lot of fucking points last year, man. I mean, that's the big thing with them. I'm going to bounce back real quick here to the offense. That's the thing. Like, I think teams know now what KJ Jefferson can do on offense, right? So I think teams are going to hone in on that. And can those receivers step up this year? Can they move the ball? I still think they're going to have to score more than 30 points a game again this year. I really, truly do with Arkansas in the schedule they have. They're just going to have to. It is the SEC. I don't think they're stupid over there. Sam Pittman, their head coach, I don't think he's an idiot. I think he's done a good job there. I think this is going to be, I believe I think it's 3rd year this year coming up. I don't think he's an incompetent coach by any means. It's just going to be tough. The defensive side of the ball is going to be tough. But then I look at Arkansas, and they're not a predominant school like, the SEC. They're not the first team you think of when you bring up the SEC. You'd probably name 6 other schools. And I'm not knocking on Arkansas that way. I mean, they just this year is going to be interesting. I also think, though, that they have a chance to be back up there. 7-6 last year, probably not the season they wanted, obviously, as a program and as a fan. But if you can get back up into that 7, 8, 9 wins again, we'll get into I think we're going to break down their schedule real quick here, Christian. I want to hear your thoughts, though. Since you put your money where your mouth was last year, what do you see them doing this year with that schedule? And we'll probably dig into that real quickly, unless you got anything else to say.
No, I'll actually go ahead and touch. I was going to touch a little more on the defensive side here before we get into the schedule. But that's okay though. So look, here's the thing: they ranked 124th last year in total defense.
Jesus,
and we kind of touched on it. I mean, that doesn't tell the whole story, though, right? Because we talked about there was games where they held like LSU to 20 points, right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing, dude. If they could have scored 30 points in every game they lost last year, they would have finished 11-2.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about that. Like, in this high prolific style of offense that we're at, if you could have just broke the 30-point mark, and I'm not saying that's easy, not in the SEC, but they'd have been 11-2.
Right.
If you're going to be elite, you got to be elite. You got to figure out a way to put at least 30 points on the board. That was like Georgia's biggest problem against Alabama a lot of the times. I think, to me, and it's not for lack of players either on the defensive side of the ball, right? The biggest hit this team took was linebackers Bumper Poole and Drew Sanders, who I think will do pretty good at the next level. I mean, they're both guys that played a ton of football at this level, and they're going to be all right. The front seven, right? The front seven, there's some question marks there. There's question marks all over this defense this year. I'm not going to sugarcoat this, right? They're going to, again, Sam Pittman's not scared to go out in that portal and get
no.
Going. He knows he's got a short window and he's got to start doing something. He's got to build upon it. I like that. He's Georgia. He came from the Georgia School of Thought there, the Hard Knocks. He was the offensive line coach. So, I'm all for some Sam Pittman. They got some transfers, but they're going to look to probably lean more on Zach Williams and Landon Jackson. They both combined for 7.5 sacks last year. Linebacker room is going to be led by Chris Paul Jr. I don't think any relation to the other Chris Paul. No big deal. He had 62 tackles last year to go alongside of 4 sacks. Secondary is going to be led by safety Hudson Clark. Dude, he had 67 tackles and 11 pass deflections with 1 interception. Am I crazy? 11 pass deflections? That seems like a lot, dude.
No, it is a lot. That means he's in place, but also tells me, God, teams are throwing the ball all over you too, probably. I hate to say that.
Yeah. You're not wrong. You were not wrong. To me, a player to keep an eye on this year is going to be UGA transfer cornerback Jaheim Singletary. He was a 5-star cornerback coming out of high school, right? But he didn't record any stats at Georgia. He's talented, but they're going to need him to step up and be like their number 1 corner. I think the biggest part of this defense, Chris, this is the biggest question mark to me. How do the transfers and how do the backups and / players who saw limited action last year, how do they mesh together, right? I mean, there are a lot of spots on this defense where I think they're solid, but there's a lot more spots on the defense where there's so many question marks. I mean, the offense might have to pick up some serious slack.
Yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing with you. You laid it out perfectly, Christian, as far as the defensive side of the ball goes. Like I said, I think overall as a unit, it's easy for us to sit here and say they got to be better, right? But I mean, they have to, unless if they want to make a bowl game again. And like I said, I don't think Sam Pittman's a bad coach. I just like Arkansas is just going to have to play better. You can't give up 30 points a game, and a lot of that is the SEC. Yeah, they have these crazy anomalies where they don't, they play a low-scoring game and give up, 20 to LSU. I get it, but you got to drop that number a little bit, man. I mean, that's a lot of points, and that's putting a lot of pressure also on your fucking offense to have to score a shit ton of points. You know what I mean? The SEC is not the Big 12 or the Pac-12, in my opinion, as far as shootout games. They're not. Now, you might see that with, the old Alabama idiots out there saying, well, we scored 49 against, LSU or Tennessee when it was 52 to whatever that game was nuts. That happens every once in a while. The SEC is not a track meet. And that's where Arkansas, I think, has to get that turned around on the defensive side of the ball. I think the transfers are going to have to step up. I think Sam Pittman knows that. I don't think he's a dummy. I think he understands that. And he's like, we're going to have to play better on the other side of the ball this year. So I'm sure they're focusing on that. And I'm sure they're going to try to make it better. I do. I don't think they're going to be worse on defense this year. I really don't. Would you say 124th in total defense? There's 132 teams last year.
Yeah.
I think Nebraska was bad on defense. Holy shit. That's rough. But, yeah, no, it's really all I got to add on as far as offensive defensive side of the ball goes, Christian. I think you did a really good job of touching on that.
Well, appreciate it there, boss. All right, let's jump into what do you think? I mean, Chris, what do you think they're going to do this year, man? What do you got, man?
I'm going to say here's this is just my opinion. And I ain't afraid to lay it out there, but I have them at 8-4 this year. And we'll break down the schedule here, Christian. You scroll up. I want to see that first game real quick here. Western Carolina, Kent State, BYU. Arkansas is going to roll those teams, BYU included. The LSU game, played them tough last year, didn't they, Christian? If I'm not mistaken.
They did.
It's at LSU this year, though. And I know you're not as big as I am in home field advantage, but at the end of the day, LSU, obviously I have them higher in my rankings. LSU is going to win that game. A&M is kind of scary. And I know we haven't talked a ton. We have talked about A&M, but not a ton this year. I actually think Arkansas can beat them. I know that might surprise you a little bit, but that's a tough stretch there where you go LSU, A&M, Ole Miss, and Bama, right? I mean, if they even come out of that 2-2, that stretch, and I'm probably having losses to LSU and Alabama personally. Ole Miss, though, Lane Kiffin, we talked about him just earlier, and that team, they're obviously looking to get better. They need to get better. Otherwise, he ain't going to have a job, and he'll bounce to his 17th school here. I I just overall, I see LSU, Alabama being losses, and I hate that because I'm not an Alabama fan whatsoever. The Mississippi State game, Mississippi State, I think, is going to be super down this year. Florida, you guys all know what I think about Florida as being a dumpster fire again this year. Auburn, I actually think they're in the same category as Arkansas. So that could be a potential loss. I think Missouri is going to be much more improved this year. But I have 8-4, Christian. I will definitely say losses to LSU and Alabama. I would scatter in maybe an A&M, an Ole Miss. I know this sounds very, very vague, but even Auburn, I have an 8-4. I want to hear your thoughts. Arkansas is a very interesting team to me this year. I think they have a chance if they really get hot with the veteran quarterback, which I do love. If their defense improves, I could see maybe a 9-3, God, dare I say 10-2 season out of Arkansas this year. I know that's stretching it. They'd have to win a lot of tough games. But I'm not throwing Arkansas out the mix here. I'm actually relatively high on Arkansas. I just think their defense is just such a question mark. It leaves a lot of room for debate.
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely said it right, Chris. I've got them at 9-3.
Okay.
9-3. I got losses to LSU, Ole Miss, and Bama.
Okay.
Could they lose to Mississippi State? They did it last year, right?
Yeah.
Auburn's never a tough game, Auburn's never an easy game, especially late in the year, right?
No, they're not. They usually get better.
Missouri, kind of the same thing, right? Missouri's that weird team.
Missouri's going to be better this year, dude. I don't want to say I'm high on them. I think they're going to surprise some people this year, Christian. Personally.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong on that. I think it's going to be interesting, dude. Like I said, I got them at 9-3, LSU, Ole Miss, and Bama. I don't think that they're going to be – there could be some – they could either shock the hell out of me this year and upset some of those teams, or they could disappoint the hell out of me, lose to all those teams, and then some, right?
Right.
Or
right.
they could do some weird shit like beat Bama, lose to Ole Miss, lose to Texas A&M, beat LSU, lose,
Yeah,
I mean,
so what is your – that was what I was going to ask you, because I was kind of thinking the same thing. Like, they're one of these teams that might beat an LSU, like shock the world week 4, and then fucking shit the bed against A&M and Bama and maybe lose to like an Auburn, you know what I mean? And then, yeah, they still get to 9 wins or 8 wins or whatever the case may be. But my question to you, what is their floor this year? And I know this is very tough to predict because I think Missouri kind of is in that Arkansas – talent-wise, I actually think Arkansas is better than Missouri personally, but, I mean, Auburn is in that talk, right? You can't throw out Ole Miss, too. You know what I mean? I kind of put those, like, group those guys kind of together in the SEC in a way as far as just talent-wise and my predictions.
And you asked the tough question. I would say the floor. Man, I will give you, like, a legit floor here of
6, 7?
5, 6 wins. I mean, because you got to think BYU, dude. Maybe BYU can play spoiler. They do it every. I feel like year. They always keep some or they always get it right down to the wire, or they upset somebody. I mean, it is scary as hell. I think they upset Tennessee not too long ago, right? A couple years back. Obviously, completely different players and stuff, but
but that was with the MILF Hunter and Zach Wilson playing quarterback, though. Come on.
Yeah, I'm just saying BYU could probably shock them, right? I mean, LSU. Texas A&M, Ole Miss, you did say it, man. That is a tough match there. So theoretically, you can start the year off 2-0 and then go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 5 losses in a row, and then finish 500. I mean, I'm not saying Florida International is going to beat them, but who knows? I mean, that late in the season, Florida, Auburn, Mississippi State, Missouri, what the hell do they have left to be playing?
Right. No, and I agree, and I will say this: if anybody's watching, I mean, Vegas has them at 7 wins this year, and Vegas is usually a game they're either spot on or they're 1 game off, up or down. You know what I mean? So, like, their floor technically would be probably 6. Their ceiling would maybe be 8. I mean, me and Christian are definitely on the higher end of that with Arkansas this year, just with the talent they're returning on the offensive side of the ball. So, interesting take, though, Christian. Arkansas is a very, they're a hard team to predict. They really are. It's one of the toughest teams I think we've had to do is just far as SEC is so tough anyway, especially that whole middle pack of teams. It's like, damn, they could shock the world and, like you said, beat a Alabama or maybe beat an LSU week 4, which would be a huge upset. I'm sure nothing would make Arkansas fans happier, to knock off, because LSU is going to be top 6-7 start the season. So like, if not higher. So I like I said, I'm kind of rooting for the Hogs, man. That's why I got that name underneath my name today. So here we are.
Lost Hog, man. I hope they do, dude. I really hope they do.